There are certain moments that arrive so quietly that most people walk straight through them without ever realizing they have crossed an invisible threshold. You are standing inside one of those moments now. If you have always sensed that reality speaks through subtle feelings instead of dramatic announcements, then the days unfolding around you were designed to capture your attention. What appears ordinary on the surface may carry extraordinary significance beneath it. During this brief stretch of time, three separate celestial movements are taking place within only a few days of one another. They are not isolated events. Together, they create an energetic sequence that many people may overlook, yet those who naturally perceive emotional shifts, intuitive nudges, and symbolic patterns may experience them with remarkable intensity. Before this journey through the week is complete, you may discover that these coming days hold far greater importance than they appear to hold today. The deepest transformations rarely begin with fireworks. More often they whisper before they ever speak aloud. There are seasons when life does not immediately replace one chapter with another. Instead, it quietly places the first sentence of the next story in front of you and waits to see whether you notice it. That is why this particular week deserves your awareness. It may not deliver the dramatic breakthrough you have imagined. It may not be the instant when every unanswered question suddenly receives a perfect explanation. The long-awaited message may not fully arrive yet. The opportunity you have been hoping for may not completely reveal itself. The situation that has weighed on your heart may not instantly reverse direction before your eyes. Instead, these days resemble the opening glimpse of something much larger. Previews have a strange nature because they never reveal the complete picture. They offer fragments instead of conclusions. They place a fleeting encounter in your path, then disappear. They allow an emotion to surface that refuses to leave. They create an unexpected coincidence that feels insignificant until much later. Then one day you remember that seemingly ordinary moment and recognize it as the very first indication that everything had already begun to change. Life often introduces major turning points exactly this way. Before the visible transformation comes the invisible preparation. Rather than presenting every answer at once, life scatters small pieces across your path. One attachment gradually loses its power over you. One uncomfortable truth becomes impossible to avoid. One familiar circumstance begins to feel strangely unfamiliar. One part of your personality quietly stops reacting the way it always has. In the beginning, these shifts appear so subtle that they are easy to dismiss. Yet those quiet internal adjustments are frequently the earliest evidence that a completely different future has already started taking shape. Among every lunar influence unfolding during this week, the one carrying the greatest symbolic weight is also the one that cannot be seen with human eyes. That hidden quality is precisely what makes the new moon on July 14 so compelling. Conversations about the moon usually revolve around the full moon because its brilliance demands attention. Its light fills the night sky, making it an obvious focal point for spiritual reflection. The new moon follows an entirely different rhythm. Instead of illuminating what has reached completion, it quietly plants the beginning of what still exists beyond ordinary sight. Long before modern life distracted humanity from the natural sky, many ancient cultures organized their calendars around the appearance of the new moon rather than the full moon. They understood that the birth of a fresh cycle deserved careful observation because every visible outcome first emerged from an unseen beginning. This particular new moon carries an additional layer of meaning because it is also a super new moon. The moon is traveling close to Earth near perigee, increasing its energetic presence, yet its dark face is turned toward us, leaving it invisible from our perspective. Closer yet unseen, more influential yet concealed. That contrast contains the deeper lesson. Not every beginning is meant to announce itself immediately. Some new chapters require protection while they are still forming beneath the surface. If your own life currently feels unusually quiet, incomplete, or difficult to explain, resist the temptation to conclude that nothing meaningful is happening. Silence does not always indicate absence. Sometimes it is the sacred space where the unseen foundation is being established before external reality finally reflects it. Before this weekend arrives, there are 3 intentional choices worth making. Begin by rising earlier than you normally would at least once during the week. The purpose is not productivity achievement or building a flawless morning routine. The invitation is simply to encounter your own thoughts before the outside world begins competing for your attention. Leave your phone untouched. Allow the silence to remain undisturbed. Give yourself several uninterrupted moments when your awareness belongs entirely to you before anyone else has the opportunity to influence it. Next, complete something or make one meaningful commitment before Sunday arrives. Do not postpone action until every uncertainty disappears. Decide while questions still exist. Send the message. Begin the project. Finish the unfinished task. Make the choice, or finally acknowledge a truth you have quietly carried inside yourself. The desire for complete certainty often disguises fear so convincingly that it appears wise when it is actually preventing movement. Finally, each evening before falling asleep, spend a few minutes vividly imagining the life you genuinely hope to create. Do this every night, throughout the week, not occasionally, not only when you remember, but consistently. Picture the relationships, the peace, the purpose, and the future toward which your heart is already reaching. Many people unknowingly fall asleep replaying their worries, then awaken still carrying those same emotional burdens into the following day. Whatever your mind repeatedly rehearses before sleep gradually shapes the direction in which your inner energy begins moving. Authentic spiritual growth is not always born during peaceful seasons. Tranquility may provide space for reflection, but pressure exposes the beliefs that truly govern your choices. That is why an active and unpredictable week can accelerate personal transformation far more quickly than long periods spent waiting for ideal circumstances. When events unfold rapidly, there is less opportunity to analyze every possibility until confidence finally appears. You are invited to choose. You are invited to trust the wisdom developing inside yourself. You begin recognizing what genuinely deserves your attention and what merely keeps you trapped in endless repetition. That is the moment when growth stops being a comforting idea and becomes lived experience. Speaking about faith is simple when nothing challenges it. Declaring trust in the universe requires very little courage while life remains quiet. Everything changes when uncertainty arrives, because that is the moment. Your deepest convictions are no longer measured by your words, but by the choices you are willing to make. Everything sounds simple while circumstances remain predictable. It is easy to believe you know yourself when every plan unfolds exactly as expected, when your schedule leaves room to breathe, when your emotions remain steady, and when life asks very little of you. The real revelation begins the moment that rhythm is interrupted. When carefully arranged plans suddenly shift direction, when the hours in your day seem to disappear faster than you can manage them, when emotions begin rising one after another without giving you time to recover, and when important decisions can no longer be postponed, you finally meet the version of yourself that has been hidden beneath comfort. Those moments expose something no peaceful season ever can. Calm allows you to recognize what your heart desires, but pressure uncovers the deeper structure of your character. It reveals what remains standing after uncertainty strips away your usual sense of control. Because of that, do not make the mistake of believing this week is working against you simply because it feels unusually active, unpredictable, or emotionally demanding. There are certain periods that seem chaotic only because they are removing distractions that have delayed your growth for far too long. This may become one of those rare stretches of time when your priorities stop competing with each other and suddenly arrange themselves into unmistakable clarity. Instead of endlessly postponing action, instead of convincing yourself that one more confirmation is necessary before taking the next step, you may finally recognize that endless preparation has become another way of standing still. Some weeks never offer additional time to think. Instead, they offer a clearer understanding of what truly matters. That deeper truth often accelerates spiritual evolution more than many quiet weeks spent waiting for ideal circumstances that never fully arrive. One of the greatest obstacles people face during spiritually significant periods is the expectation that guidance must arrive through one overwhelming event. They search for a dramatic confirmation that removes every remaining doubt. While they are waiting for something extraordinary, they often overlook the language that life has been speaking all along. Transformational weeks frequently reveal themselves through repetition instead of spectacle. You may begin noticing the same number appearing again and again without trying to find it. A particular subject may unexpectedly arise in completely unrelated conversations. Different people who have never met may mention remarkably similar ideas. Your attention may repeatedly return to the same decision, the same location, the same name, the same possibility, or the same direction, no matter how many times you deliberately push it aside. These recurring experiences should not always be dismissed as meaningless coincidence. Long before major external events unfold, life often communicates through repeating patterns that quietly gather your attention. Many people miss these invitations because they are waiting for something impossible. They imagine that true guidance should arrive with undeniable drama. They want the heavens to deliver a message so unmistakable that personal trust is no longer required. Yet authentic spiritual direction rarely operates that way. More often it arrives gently, consistently, and patiently. A message does not lose its importance simply because it speaks softly. When the same signal continues returning without your effort, its consistency may carry greater significance than any dramatic moment ever could. Throughout this week, remain aware of whatever naturally repeats itself. There is no need to become obsessive or attempt to assign mystical meaning to every ordinary event. Simply observe what continues finding its way back into your awareness without being pursued. Sometimes repetition itself becomes the message. If the same thought, opportunity, memory, or direction refuses to fade during a week carrying this kind of energetic atmosphere, there may be a deeper reason your spirit continues holding it within your field of attention. Another powerful influence arrives through Mercury's inferior solar conjunction. Its significance extends far beyond external circumstances because its deeper purpose often unfolds inside your own perception. Rather than dramatically changing the world around you overnight, this alignment can quietly transform the lens through which you interpret your entire life. That subtle shift matters far more than many people realize. A single realization can reorganize countless future experiences without making any immediate announcement. The transformation is often silent rather than dramatic. You release one limiting belief, and suddenly countless future decisions naturally begin following a different course. You stop believing that every opportunity must be chased, and your relationship with energy immediately changes. You stop believing that you have somehow fallen behind everyone else, and your sense of timing becomes completely different. You stop believing that one individual, one obstacle, or one lingering fear possesses authority over your future, and the emotional grip that once held your direction begins to loosen. This is why the coming days may feel unusual. Outward appearances may remain almost identical, yet if the conclusion inside your own mind changes, the road ahead changes with it. One corrected perspective can prevent you from repeating an entire cycle that no longer belongs to the person you are becoming. Pay careful attention to the thought that unexpectedly rearranges everything this week. Notice the instant when understanding finally settles into place. Observe the realization that reveals you have been measuring your life according to an assumption that no longer reflects reality. On July 17th, the moon joins Venus, creating an influence that can awaken the distinctive emotional attraction. Many people immediately associate this alignment with romance, reconciliation, or the unexpected return of someone from the past. While those possibilities certainly attract attention, they represent only the surface expression of this celestial meeting. Its deeper significance lies within emotional memory itself. During this period, people naturally feel drawn toward whatever provides a sense of comfort, familiarity, warmth, and emotional security. Sometimes that place of comfort is not a location at all. Sometimes it is another person, and sometimes that person is you. That is why the timing surrounding this transit deserves more attention than the identity of the individual involved. If someone reaches out to you around this day, resist focusing only on the question of why they decided to contact you now. A more meaningful question asks what emotional experience they are unconsciously trying to reconnect with. Human beings do not always long for another person because they fully understand who that individual truly is. Quite often they miss the emotional atmosphere they experienced while sharing space with that person's energy. They remember feeling understood without needing to explain themselves. They remember feeling accepted without constantly defending who they were. They remember becoming a gentler version of themselves simply because your presence allowed their heart to soften. People frequently return to the place where their nervous system remembers peace, even when they cannot fully explain why. Therefore, if someone unexpectedly appears again during this period, resist the urge to immediately interpret it as destiny or proof that everything has permanently changed. Do not rush into believing that every unfinished chapter is automatically meant to begin again. Instead, remain curious about the emotional foundation beneath the action. They may not actually be searching for the past itself. They may simply be searching for the feeling of safety that once existed there, and recognizing that difference could become one of the most important realizations you carry into the next part of this remarkable week. The energy surrounding July 17th may quietly reveal something that words alone rarely uncover. It can show you who still associates your presence with a feeling they have been unable to replace. For some people, you represent peace after chaos. For others, you symbolize warmth, beauty, emotional ease, or a sense of belonging that has never been fully recreated anywhere else. That realization is not merely about relationships. It is about understanding the emotional imprint you leave behind in the lives of others. At the same time, this very week carries another purpose that reaches much deeper into your own inner world. It has the potential to expose a single habit that has been shaping your reality from the background without asking for your permission. What makes this discovery so surprising is that the habit may not appear harmful at all. In fact, it may seem completely ordinary because repetition has made it feel like part of your identity. After living with the same automatic response for so long, the mind eventually stops recognizing it as a pattern and begins accepting it as simply who you are. Every person carries one instinctive reaction that activates almost immediately whenever pressure enters life. It happens so naturally that it often escapes conscious awareness. What feels like personality is sometimes nothing more than an unconscious attempt to regain control when uncertainty appears. That distinction matters because many of the behaviors we defend as normal are actually protective mechanisms that quietly determine the direction of our lives. For some individuals, that pattern appears as an endless search for reassurance. Every decision feels incomplete until someone else approves it. Every step forward seems to require another sign, another message, another response, another opinion, or another confirmation before confidence can exist. On the surface, this behavior may appear thoughtful and responsible. It is easy to describe it as caution or wisdom. Yet beneath that explanation, something much deeper may be taking place. Each time personal certainty is exchanged for someone else's approval, a small piece of inner authority is surrendered. Instead of trusting the wisdom already growing within, safety becomes dependent upon external validation. Over time, that repeated exchange slowly teaches the heart that it cannot move without permission, even when the answer has already been quietly waiting inside. For others, the hidden pattern reveals itself in a different form. They agree too quickly before allowing themselves the space to discover what they genuinely feel. Their instinct is to say yes because refusing feels uncomfortable. They continue opening the door to people, obligations, situations, and expectations that steadily consume their emotional energy. Eventually, they begin wondering why their own dreams never seem to arrive on time. Yet the delay may not always be created by outside circumstances. Sometimes the real cause is far more subtle. Energy that should have been invested in building your future is repeatedly spent maintaining commitments that were never truly yours to carry. Every unnecessary obligation quietly redirects your attention away from the life you are trying to create. Then there are those whose automatic response is avoidance. Rather than confronting what matters most, they postpone the conversation, delay the decision, and continue circling the same unresolved truth, while secretly hoping life will eventually make the choice for them. Yet life rarely allows avoidance to remain silent forever. During a week carrying this kind of spiritual intensity, whatever has been ignored often begins appearing from multiple directions. The issue returns wearing different faces until it becomes impossible to overlook. Eventually, a moment arrives when avoiding the truth requires more emotional energy than simply facing it. That realization can become the beginning of genuine freedom. Often the greatest limitation in your life is not the obstacle standing in front of you. It is the familiar habit you have unknowingly accepted as normal. That is one of the reasons this week deserves your attention. It may naturally illuminate the very behavior that has been quietly directing your progress behind the scenes. This revelation does not arrive to criticize you or make you feel guilty. It comes to reveal exactly where your energy has been escaping without your awareness. Perhaps every promising opportunity immediately awakens suspicion inside you. The instant something positive begins unfolding, your attention automatically searches for everything that could possibly go wrong. You may call this realism, believing you are simply protecting yourself from disappointment. Yet there are moments when fear disguises itself as intelligence, speaking with such convincing logic that it becomes difficult to recognize its true voice. If every open doorway is questioned before you even take a single step toward it, eventually you may convince yourself that opportunities never appear in your life. The deeper reality may be that you learned to retreat from possibility long before possibility had the chance to reveal itself. Or perhaps your hidden pattern revolves around certainty. You want complete assurance before taking action. You want to know the destination before beginning the journey. You want every answer before making the commitment. You wait for guarantees that life was never designed to provide in advance. Certain chapters simply refuse to open under those conditions because certainty is not always the reward that comes before movement. Quite often, it arrives afterward. Confidence grows after the decision has already been made, after the first courageous step has already been taken, after you demonstrate that fear is no longer allowed to determine the timing of your life. During this week, that automatic behavior may become visible in surprisingly ordinary moments. You may suddenly notice yourself reaching for reassurance and realize the pattern while it is happening. You may begin saying yes before an unexpected pause inside reminds you to listen more carefully. You may postpone an important action yet again, only to discover that your own excuse has finally become impossible to believe. You may begin doubting something genuinely good, then recognize that your doubt appeared long before any evidence supported it. Those moments carry extraordinary value because awareness interrupts unconscious repetition. The instant a hidden pattern becomes visible, it loses much of its ability to direct your choices without permission. That is where spiritual growth becomes something real rather than merely inspirational. It extends beyond discussing celestial events, lunar cycles, subtle energies, or waiting for the universe to arrange every detail on your behalf. Sometimes the most meaningful spiritual practice is recognizing the exact instant you're about to act against your own future and consciously choosing another response instead. Perhaps this week is not asking you to transform every part of your existence all at once. Perhaps its invitation is far simpler and far more powerful. It may only ask you to interrupt one familiar reaction, to pause before one automatic yes, to release one unnecessary delay, to stop seeking one more confirmation you no longer need, or to refuse one final moment when fear tries to convince you to shrink away from something that could genuinely change your life. Never underestimate the power of breaking a single unconscious pattern, because one different choice can redirect an entire future. The instant you refuse to follow an old habit that has quietly dictated your behavior for years, you begin creating possibilities that pattern would never have allowed to exist. That is why the coming days deserve more than casual attention. Do not focus only on the events unfolding around you. Watch yourself just as carefully. Observe what your mind immediately wants to do when life becomes uncertain. Notice the reaction that appears before you even have time to think. Hidden inside that automatic response may be the very answer you have been searching for. The habit itself may be the lock, and your awareness of it may become the key that finally opens the next stage of your journey. Once you clearly recognize the behavior that has been silently directing your progress from behind the scenes, you may discover that your life has never truly been trapped. Instead, it has simply been moving according to an old emotional program that no longer has to decide your future. The moment you stop allowing that familiar response to lead, an entirely different path becomes available. What once seemed impossible can suddenly begin feeling natural, not because the world changed overnight, but because you finally responded differently to it. One of the greatest misunderstandings about personal transformation is the belief that visible results must appear immediately in order for meaningful change to be taking place. People often convince themselves that nothing is improving simply because they cannot yet point to dramatic evidence. They assume they are standing still because the outer circumstances still resemble yesterday. They begin questioning their effort because the reward has not yet become obvious. Yet life rarely reveals every layer of its construction while the foundation is still being built. Some of the most significant shifts happen in complete silence, beneath the surface where no audience can celebrate them, and where even you may begin wondering whether anything is truly changing at all. Quiet growth asks for patience because it develops long before it announces itself. If you honestly look back over the past weeks or even the past months, You may realize that far more has changed within you than you have been willing to acknowledge. Perhaps your discipline has grown a little stronger than it once was. Perhaps your awareness has become a little sharper. Maybe your willingness to tolerate situations that drain your spirit has quietly begun disappearing. Perhaps honesty has become easier than pretending. Courage may have appeared in moments where fear once controlled every decision. You may have developed the ability to pause before reacting instead of immediately repeating the same emotional cycle. Little by little, you may have become more willing to choose your own well-being without apologizing for it. None of these adjustments necessarily attract attention in the moment they happen. They rarely feel dramatic while they are unfolding. Yet their true influence should never be measured individually. Their strength comes from accumulation. Every small improvement joins the one before it, until together they create momentum powerful enough to transform an entire direction. This is the rhythm through which lasting progress often unfolds. At first, your effort appears invisible. Then it seems almost insignificant. Then, without warning, the same consistent choices that once felt unnoticed begin producing undeniable results. People observing from the outside frequently describe that moment as luck because they only witnessed the visible breakthrough. They never see the countless unseen moments that made it possible. They do not know about the private decisions that nobody applauded. They never witnessed the evenings when you continued moving forward despite having no proof that anything was changing. They did not hear the conversations you stopped having with your own fear. They did not see the destructive thoughts you gradually refused to nourish. They never met the older version of you that quietly disappeared before the stronger version could fully emerge. What appears to be sudden transformation is often nothing more than gradual transformation, finally reaching a point where it can no longer remain hidden. That perspective changes everything about this week. Perhaps these days are not creating an entirely new beginning from nothing. Perhaps they're revealing what has already been developing beneath the surface all along. Once hidden momentum reaches its natural threshold, movement often accelerates far more quickly than expected. A single conversation may completely redirect your future. One decision may dissolve confusion that has lingered for months. A seemingly modest opportunity may unexpectedly expand into something much greater. A mental barrier that has restricted your thinking may finally collapse. A forgotten desire may return with surprising strength. A doorway that always existed may suddenly open because you have finally become the person capable of walking through it. This is also the moment when spiritually aware individuals must remain grounded. Resist the temptation to label rapid change as random fortune or meaningless coincidence. What appears sudden from the outside is often delayed alignment, finally arriving at exactly the right time. It represents the natural outcome of every quiet improvement that once seemed too small to matter. Every healthier choice, every occasion when you refused to repeat an old reaction, every moment of patience while external reality remained unchanged, every act of inner discipline that nobody else ever witnessed. Progress has an unusual relationship with visibility. It often conceals itself until enough unseen work has accumulated to move something that previously refused to change. Imagine the life of the seed resting beneath the soil. For what seems like a very long time, nothing visible happens above the ground. Anyone looking only at the surface may conclude that growth has failed. Yet below that quiet surface, everything essential is taking place. Roots are extending deeper. Structure is becoming stronger. Stability is quietly forming where nobody can see it. Then eventually a small green shoot emerges into the light. To anyone who ignored the hidden process, it appears as though the plant arrived overnight. Yet nothing about it happened overnight. It spent its unseen season preparing for the moment it could finally become visible. Human growth follows remarkably similar laws. Your own life may be operating according to that same quiet process right now. This week could become one of those rare moments when everything that has been developing invisibly finally begins revealing itself in ways you can recognize, not because the universe suddenly decided to notice you, not because reality changed without cause, instead because the timing, the pressure, your inner development, and every seemingly insignificant decision have finally accumulated enough strength that they can no longer remain beneath the surface. If you have stayed with this message until this moment, thank you for giving your attention to something that asks for more than a few distracted seconds. That choice alone reflects something meaningful about you. Many people leave the moment reflection becomes uncomfortable or requires sustained focus. You remained present, and perhaps that is because a deeper part of you already senses that this week carries more significance than appearances suggest. As these next few days continue unfolding, allow events to develop at their own pace. Do not rush to force meaning where clarity has not yet arrived. Do not attempt to control timing that is still arranging itself. If external circumstances remain quiet for a little while longer, resist the urge to believe nothing is happening. Very often, the inner shift begins long before visible proof catches up with it. Protect the quality of your energy. Complete what is already within your power to complete. Stay aware of whatever naturally continues repeating throughout the week. Most importantly, never dismiss the importance of the small choices you make during these days, because those seemingly ordinary decisions may become the very steps that eventually open a far greater opportunity waiting just ahead. Something meaningful may already be much closer than it appears today. Continue taking care of yourself, remain open to what this week quietly reveals, and I look forward to sharing the next part of this journey with you.